that over the years I've noticed the most sustainable thing um, are rites of passage programs. Remember,
Mm,
we lost the military war because we got captured, right? That was a military battle. We
mm,
lost the military war, and we all know that. But the thing which we don't always fully appreciate is losing the cultural war, and that means our relations.
mm,
They have to decimate the so-called family and tribal relationships. They had to decimate them in order
mm.
to um, actualize the subordination. You can't
Right.
subordinate the people if they're connected, if they're
Mm,
struggling and see their collective survival as primary.
If I asked you to get a piece of paper and something to write with, and to make a numerical list of all the things that you would be willing to die for, how long is your list?
The Panther 48.
Willing to die for.
The Panther 48.
Willing to die for. How long is your list?
What is the tribal self?
The Panther
The
48.
tribal self is what goes above the immediate acquaintances of the social.
Willing to die
The
for.
family, the people you know, live next door.
You would be willing
I'm
to
talking
die
about
for.
tribal
The
self.
Panther 48.
I'm talking about those living, those yet unborn. Peace and power. Once again, this is the Panther 48. This brother Sykes sitting with you, calling out of Texas. I got with me the other two brothers in the Panther 48, my brother Robert Ward Williams, chairman of the San Diego chapter of the Black Panther Party and former chairman of the new Black Panther Party Dallas, original Dallas chapter, and also chief of staff, national chief of staff of the People's Black Panther Party, headquartered out of Atlanta and chaired by Yangi and Crewman. Peace and power, brother Ward.
Hey, all power to people, everyone.
I have brother E, our Minister of Information Emeritus. I can't say it enough. Also, former Minister of Information of the new Black Panther Party, the original chapter of the new Black Panther Party, and for a small inkling of a moment, chairman of the Dallas chapter of the new Black Panther Party. Peace and power, brother E.
Etep and Ashe.
And we view E as our expert on cultural affairs and African thought, and he don't like the word expert, and our number one unapologetic African. We have two visitors, two guests today, which I think is going to make the show exciting and on point and on time. We have, once again, I think for our third time, we have brother Magnetic Allah, and I'm going to allow the brother to introduce himself. Brother, tell the people who you are and what corner of this planet are you representing this struggle from? Could you please get that to the people, brother?
Indeed. I say peace, black power, refinement to the family. So happy to be here with the Panther 48. I'm going to say most recently, what brought me back to the Panther thing was a Panther that was born in 1948, Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad. And his demonstration, even when he was amongst the NOI, was a Panther demonstration. You know what I mean? So when I saw the brother, he was resurrecting the three ingredients of the original Black Panther Party, that being liberation theology, Pan-Africanism, Black nationalism. I said, man, now that's the type of Panther cake that I could definitely partake in. So, I came back to the table. Now me, I'm from Seattle, okay, but my father's from Watts, and my mother's people's from Georgia. So you can imagine how that came together, but I was raised up here in the original New Black Panther Party. And, just as a young activist and whatnot, and at a certain point, they pulled me to the table, sat me down. This is like the elders, and they passed the torch to us, you know what I mean? Saying, hey, we're getting older and we see y'all's work, what y'all doing, which I will go into at some point, and they passed the torch to us. So I took that very seriously. And ever since then, I've been, striving to do the things that's Panther work. And when I go into it, I take a liberation theology path to it. So I start with like Psalms 82. And, when you add the Panther up, the word Panther comes to 82. So that's what took me to Psalms 82, because a lot of the stuff that people would consider Christian work started out as Christian work, turned later into work that the party did. And with that, I'm gonna say that and pass the mic. Black Power Refinement. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, brother. Peace and power. And we have a very special guest on today to essentially lead this conversation. We have a brother, and I hope I get this name right. And as Brother E in the beginning was excusing Brother War, I have to excuse myself for having African lips that have been trained to speak an English language in America. So I may get this, and I'm trying to speak an original name with all of this mix-up that I have going on. So I hope I get it right, and if I don't, I ask you to please forgive me. But we got Brother Dr. Onaje Muid in the building, and the brother is, I'm gonna let him tell you who he is, what he does. Peace and power, Brother Dr. Onaje Muid.
Peace and power to you, my brother. So I am son of Sylvia Oliver and Thomas Oliver. And just wanted, the brother mentioned scripture, and I walked into 59 Wright Street. Now, to many that might mean nothing at all. So this was a group working with gun violence prevention in Staten Island. And I looked at the number and said, okay. Then when I walked into the office, it had Matthew 5:9. And Matthew 5:9 says, blessed are the peacemakers. Now, I want you to understand that my name is 59. Muid is the 59th name of Allah. So when I walked in the building, I just noticed the 59. And then when I walked into the office, so there would be no mistake about it, the brother had Matthew 5:9 on the wall. I said, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. So I've been there for the last, 8 years, working with the group. It's called True to Life. So I want to big up Iron Mike and the crew in Staten Island, because these are brothers, some of them been upstate, been around the block, and they've turned their life around. And I tell them they are the real revolutionaries. And they look at me strange. And I said, it's true, because one, you look at yourself in the mirror, you ask yourself some critical questions, and you turn your life around 180 degrees. That's what a revolutionary does. That's what revolution is all about. And I start off with that is because I want to big up the places that I'm connected with and the work that I do. So as a revolutionary, I'm looking to, and have been for all of my adult life, work with different organizations. So I'm the current co-chair of N.B.P.P. N.B.P.P is a National Coalition of Blacks Reparations in America. I'm co-chair of the Health Commission, and I'm also the co-chair of the National Association of Black Social Workers National Relations Committee, and a few other things. So my work is about healing our people, and just putting in the time and the effort to make things better. And making things better is understand the kind of situation that we're in. This is the first generation that we have seriously looked at what is called historical trauma, and how that has affected all the different generations. But now we're looking at it straightforward, straight in the face, and saying like, okay, we're going to reverse this. So I'm honored to be here with you young brothers to share some of my possible insights and contribute to the conversation that we're starting. And with that, I'm complete.
And we thank you, brother. We appreciate you for coming on board. The way I'm going to do this today, usually I'll lead the questions. I'm going to allow War to lead the questions. And we're going to start from right here. Brother War, you got the mic.
All right, Doctor. You kind of started us off already in regards to saying a little bit about yourself. Have you done any work or got any concept of in regards to acupuncture as far as what Dr. Mutulu Shakur was doing?
That is interesting that you bring that up.
Go ahead.
That is just incredible. Wow. So anyway, I was corrected by Walter Bosque the other day when I said Dr. Mutulu Shakur created the 5 irregular 5 points, and he said no, he was part of a collective, and that was the Lincoln Detox Collective. And he wanted to send me all the names of those brothers and sisters who did that. And that's really befitting, because Mutulu was about collective work and responsibility. He wasn't looking for any kind of limelight for himself. He was part of a collective. So even in the movie, if you all have seen it, the documentary that's called Dope is Death, it takes around, I think 40 minutes into the film before they show him and have an interview with him. And I think he would want it that way. He would want to talk about the people and talk about the collective. So my background as a social worker has been in the field of behavioral health ever since 1986. Well, technically, it really started in 1980 when I was working in the youth center in El Barrio, which is East Harlem. But in '86, I started to work for Phase Piggyback, which was a drug-free facility on 145th Street between Amsterdam and Broadway. And we redefined what substance abuse treatment is. We said we don't need treatment. What we need is resocialization. Mm-hmm. So it was then that I found out that acupuncture was being used. In fact, training was taking place at Lincoln Hospital. And that's, of course, where Mutulu first did his work. So I knew about it and had taken some classes. I didn't finish it. But of late, I've gotten interested in it again. And as a result of that, I teach at different universities. I was teaching some of his work, particularly in terms of public health. But the National Coalition of Blacks Representing America in COBRA, as the co-chair of the Health Commission, we started to a campaign. It's called Millions for Mutulu. And what that means is that the first year we did it, we started with one. Always got to start with one, right? Then the next year, which is this year, we said we want 100 people to sign on to the declaration. And then every year thereafter, we want to multiply it times 10. That's why it's called Millions for Mutulu. And that is really doing his work. As you know, he's an ancestor now. So I'm working with Dr. Kakaye out of Washington, D.C., and we're doing a training in Philadelphia. So all you brothers, all you comrades who have people in Philadelphia or even on the East Coast, right? People might want to travel to get this training. It's 3 days, February 23rd, 24th, and 25th. My wife, Dr. Fatima Hafiz, has in fact completed her training through another organization. What's the name? NOC. Honey, what's the name of it when you get certification? Okay, so we can't think of the exact name right now, but this organization actually stole from those brothers who created the 5 points, and they are showcased as being the premier organization that's teaching the regular 5 points, but they stole those techniques from the Lincoln Detox Collective. So yes, I'm not only am I familiar with it, it's so interesting you raised that question. Not only am I familiar with it, but I see it essential. And because it's something that we can do for ourselves, and that's what self-determination is, something that you can do for yourself. So before we can have political self-determination, we have to have self-determination. Because if people don't value their health, how in the world are they going to value their political future? They can't. It has to be them, the people, affirming themselves and fighting for their right to define themselves.
Thank you for that, because I thought that was very important. I kind of figured there was a connection there, but I couldn't find it. So I was like, let me ask. Okay.
Yeah, your intuition's right on it, brother. Right on it.
Okay.
Cool. So with that being said, what is the MSW Healing Well? Go into that.
So MSW, MSW Healing Well, Wahimi Misu. It's a Kemet word from Egypt. The real name of that land is called Kemet, not Egypt. That's a bastardization. So the word is Wahimi Misu. Brother Dr. Yehudu out of Pittsburgh taught me that in his 72 concepts of African consciousness. And it says that Wahimi Misu was, we hear the word Renaissance, right? In terms of Europeans and the Renaissance. Well, before there was the word Renaissance, Africans had already participated in the process of rebirthing themselves, of returning to the source, as Qural say. So Wahimi Misu is reaffirmation of ma'at, of order, balance, and harmony, and it's also a national reculturalization. So our people are in the process of Sankofa. Sankofa is a Dinka word that means return. So we are returning to our own consciousness. Malcolm said, when you think, when you ask the question, what have we lost? Did we lose anything in Africa? Malcolm said, we lost our minds, in Africa, because we lost ourselves, our identity. So Wahimi Misu is this word that gives us orientation and gives us a way of regaining ourselves through the process of Sankofa. So the healing well aspect, so the model for Wahimi Misu Healing Well Incorporated, which is a nonprofit, the model is a healer and a healing well in every home. So we have to have healers in our home, but the healers themselves has to have something to get replenished through, right? So you have to have the healer and you have to have the well in order for the cycle to be continuous and regenerative. That's why we link those two things together: a healer and a healing well in every home. So that's how Wahimi Misu got linked with the idea of a healing well. Thank you so much for the question.
Right. That also makes me, a lot of times I like to refer to things in terms of getting people to see the pattern of threes. And just where it goes into restore, renew, and reproduce, which I go into in terms of saying continuity. And I think that's very powerful, important that we get that. So when we talk about healing, that takes us into really one of the reasons why we thought it was important to even bring you on this show, is we were dealing with some drama that actually just took place between Panther movements. And Brother Magnetic told me and referred to that as intergenerational conflict. Can you kind of go into the concept of intergenerational conflict with us?
Well, I would think that it would have to be viewed from at least three. You said three, right? I think we'd have to view it from at least three perspectives, right, or three frameworks. One is the family itself, right? What conflict are we having in our birth families? So we get socialized to say this is how you solve problems. So if somebody takes that same socialization from their family into the neighborhood, and usually we all was told, if somebody hit you, hit them back. I mean, that's basically what most of us have been told, right? So when we take that orientation into the school, that puts us on the path of what school to prison pipeline, right? Rather than understanding and knowing our traditional way of healing conflict, right? The African way, which is through consensus, right? It's through understanding of everyone has a voice, everyone has a right to be heard. And if we go all the way back and look at the Patois people, which are called pygmies, Patois people, when they saw a conflict in a person, what they would do is put them in the middle of a circle, and they would sing. They would sing that vibration, that song that would allow that person to come back into him or herself, into their own natural flow, their own natural harmony. But we're so far removed. And these are people they call primitive. No, these people was advanced. They were so advanced, they would feel a certain thing and then would say, okay, we have to get in the circle and bring this person back into harmony so that person can be in harmony with him or herself and in harmony with the people. We're so far removed from that. So I'm saying we need to look at it in at least three levels. The first level is the family makeup in which one was raised, right? And then when you go into society, the community, that what's the norm of the community, and the community is going to give you a certain amount of orientation as to what you should do, right? And the third level is that of your relationship to the nation state in which you're living in. We as a people, we're living in colony. We're living in micro domestic colonies. Any place, any black neighborhood you go into, you're going to see a number of things. You're going to see Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard. You're going to see churches. You're going to see liquor stores. And then you're going to definitely see check cash in places, right? So, and you're going to see foreigners coming into our communities controlling the economy. We don't control the economy in our community. We don't control the politics in our community. Why? Because we are a national domestic colony, and is evidenced by the number thousands of micro domestic colonies. So on those three levels, conflict is evidencing itself in certain type of a way, right? So if you don't have an understanding of family, you're not going to solve family problems. If you don't have an understanding of community, you're not going to solve community problems. And if you don't have an understanding of colonialism, you're not going to solve the bigger colonial problem. So when we talk about intergenerational conflict, then we're talking about how has those three perspectives been given to a person or people or organization over time. And so that's the general framework. And then the second thing you have to look at is, what are the points of contention, of division? It could be on religion, or it could be on religion. It could be on ideology. I was just talking to brother Hakeem Anderson, a brother who was a lieutenant for the Revolutionary Action Movement, right, in Philadelphia under Muhammad Ahmed, Max. And he was saying that the making of the Negro was a process to alienate ourselves from ourselves and becoming to sign on to, right, the capitalist frame of reference. So conflict is happening in all these different ways, and only when we begin to study that we can start to dismantle this. Let me just say this: understanding oppression. In order to oppress the people, three things have to happen. You have to make them ahistorical, you have to make them apolitical, and you have to make them afuturistic. When you get those three things set up, checkmate, game over. So our people, in order to reverse that, have to create identity, purpose, and direction. Of course, that's what Karenga speaks about in terms of Kawida, which makes sense. You need to have your identity. You need to have identity, purpose, and direction. So without having a way of looking at those three levels, we'll get caught into the reality that's in front of us rather than the deeper realities.
Man, I think that's real deep, because what we see, and like how you said, across the three parts of that, is that these kind of studies, or these kind of analysis, should I say, are not present in the majority of us that are organizing, to the degree to where we're able to give these as a prerequisite to our members, so that our foundation is built properly. So going into the whole concept of, for instance, Panthers, our goal is to serve the community and support the community and raise community to high consciousness. But if we don't ourselves know this information and aware of the processes that you talked about and put in place, then we in fact can become part of the problem within the community.
Brother, you said it right. Either you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution, right?
Yeah, but you have to be aware.
You hit it on the head. And of course, we haven't even introduced yet, right? What happens to people who are traumatized? How does that affect their mental health? How does that play out when an argument or contradiction or a conflict comes up? If you're not grounded in your own mental health, if you haven't been taught how to self-regulate, when you get triggered, the brain works in such a fashion, it's whatever brain state that you're on, that's going to be the menu. If you are triggered and your brain state is on that lower level, which is pretty much governed by what is called the amygdala, fight, flight, right? Freeze, prawn. So if we don't have a trauma framework with each other, it's so easy to say that that's a person's personality. It's so easy to say that that's how they behave. No, that's a trauma response. So we as this generation has the first time of having the science of epigenetics at our disposal, and also the different healing modalities that have come to the fore as a result of our people going back and studying African culture and then making things available. There's a group out of Connecticut that's called the Healing Network, right? Community Healing Network, and they have partnered with the Association of Black Psychologists, and they have come up with a program that's called Emancipation Emotional Circles. It's almost like, people have heard of 12 steps, right? Alcoholism and substance abuse. It's almost like a 12-step program for our healing, where they take you through a number of concepts and processes and different interactions that allows us to understand trauma and also to do something about it. So I see that as emotional first aid. And we've never gotten it. Joy DeGruy asked the question, when did we get that therapy? Guess what? We ain't never got that therapy. And we ain't gonna get it. And the only way we're gonna have it is we're gonna have to create it ourselves. So they've taken a bold step, and I see that as being really important. Now, as a social worker, even though we have what is called the African Centered Social Work Academy, we have to do something more to say, okay, what's the social work contribution to this healing campaign that we're on as a people?
I want to ask you a question, if you don't mind. Okay, you talked about the trauma, and that touched me, because dealing with people, I'm one of those people that tend to regulate it to, oh, that's his personality, and I cut people off based on that. But for those who may not believe in the trauma that we as a people have went through, can you kind of break? And I know this requires an elongated answer, but can you kind of break down what we went through, or what would make a people have generational trauma that has never been solved today? Because a lot of people don't believe that that's real. A lot of people don't understand or comprehend how people can go through the hell that Black people have been through, and then come out of that so-called hell, but never have the psychological things that was done to us repaired, never go through the healing that we needed to go through, and how that's affecting us right now today. A lot of people don't believe that could be passed down or passed on. So can you give us a kind of like a little breakdown of that, and how that's affecting us as a people and affecting our relationships?
Yeah, I think it has a few aspects to it, or a number of approaches, number of social determinants. So if you go back to 1865 and look at what was called Black Reconstruction, what we found was that those people, our ancestors, were phenomenal. I mean, how do you come out of 200 years of slavery and become a senator and become a representative and start businesses and start outstripping your white counterpart? I mean, so the question is asked, did they have historical trauma? I don't know. Or was their drive just so fierce and centered that anything that might have been in their way, they were able to push it aside? And I think part of it was their strong belief in themselves, and because they had come out of such a harsh reality, they weren't confused. There was no confusion. So you go back to the meeting between Tecumseh's sermon and those 27 preachers in South Carolina when they met, and this is during the war, and through what was called Special Order 15, they asked the reverends, what do you want? The first thing they said is land. Land. Then they said, the second thing they said they wanted was protection, right? They wanted the federal troops, the Union troops, to be there so they could live peacefully and be able to prosper. And some families did get 40 acres of the yield. And of course, Lincoln was assassinated, and then President Johnson became president, and then he reversed and removed all of those public campaigns that was in our favor. Even if we look at Campbell, right, who was a warrior, did some war fighting the Confederates, the soldiers, and had actually his own settlement, and he based it upon, the three branches of government. And what happened was that they brought in so-called Negro soldiers to confront them and say, okay, now you have to escape the land. So all the land that the Civil War was about, all that land was returned back to the white slave masters. In fact, even prior to that, the white slave masters were given reparations. So the question that you're asking me in terms of, about historical trauma. So if you look at those people and what they were able to do, I don't know if they had historical trauma. So people have, but of course, one size doesn't fit all, right? Someone can experience a traumatic event, and everybody, if you have 20 people, the trauma response could be different in each and every one of them, right? So it's not, but that doesn't dismiss the overall collective trauma that is taking place. There's a book out called Historical Trauma, with around 28 or 30 psychologists, social workers from around the world, looking at trauma in Africa, in Asia, in the United States, and all of them are speaking about it. So we know this is an international reality. It's not just happened to African people. What we use the word called Maafa, which is the Kiswahili word that means the great tragedy. And we use that word to say this: a kidnap, it's our transport, it's the terrorism we experience. So certainly we know that the whole purpose of terrorism was to create so much fear in us that we would stay in our place. Now remember, there's never been a time we have absolutely just given up and capitulated. There's never been a time. There's always a number of us that was always fighting, and that's the story that we don't really get much of. We don't get any nourishment around all those hundreds upon hundreds of plantation revolts and stuff, right? So we have to go and dig that information up, because right now we have a less than truthful and less than healthy understanding of our ancestors. So we've been always fighting, and that fighting allows us to maintain our human dignity. So now we understand historical trauma as, I use the definition of Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart, a good friend of mine, who says that it's the trauma that has existed amongst and through generations, from one generation to the next. And what happens when people are subdued, when they're conquered, what the conqueror wants to do is to have them submit. And in that submission, they give up their human dignity. They give up the pride in themselves. They give up the idea of, to the large degree, that they can't do anything except live in a state of subordination. So what the trauma does internally, it starts to weaken the immune system. Studies have been shown that when trauma happens, the immune system is attacked. And once the immune system is attacked, then of course you can't fight off diseases. So these things are connected to heart attacks, connected to kidney failure, right? Connected to lung disease and things of that sort. And then you superimpose the environment constraints and pollutants on the people, it further weakens them. So all the health deficiencies that we have right now is connected to all these things, and we can't separate one from the other. So historical trauma is something that we are starting to study. In fact, Cobra has just come out with a report about a year ago now. It's called the Harm Report. I'm sorry I didn't bring it with me. But in that report, we trace some of these tragedies that we've gone through as people and look at the consequences of those things, and saying that now that we have the science of epigenetics, we can now construct what should be our diet? What's the amount of water we need to drink every day? What's the amount of rest that we need every day, right? How do we rebuild this physical structure? How do we start to build our mental capacity again? And all this can only be done through our social relationships, right? So the word we can use is social ecology. How now can we, when people think of, economy, right? They think of money, right? The exchange of money, think about wealth, they think about the exchange of wealth. Well, we have to now develop a concept of a health economy, right? That's done through social economy, social relationships. There's something in medicine that's called triage, right? Triage talks about when you call them to the hospital, they're saying who needs our immediate attention right now. If you're going to die, well, you're just going to have to die. If I give you the medicine, it's not going to make a difference, but you don't get the medicine. It's only on that critical person that the medicine is given. So because we're at war, and now people, some of us don't realize that, because we're at war, we have to have a war strategy to what we are faced with. And historical trauma is the first thing that we have to say. We have to say, what's the current situation of our people?
That brings me to a question here.
No.
What? I know you want. You got next.
No.
I'll let you go.
No.
Go ahead.
My turn. Okay, so, and I was kind of mad at Syke because I wanted to ask this before he said, but what he said kind of feeds into what it is I want to say and get your input, your thoughts, your ideas on it. I think that everybody would most likely agree, or at least in my mind, I'm just going to say in my mind, that the number one institution that's been the most traumatized and most attacked throughout the Ma'afa has been the institution of the family. Whether it's the ripping of families away from the continent to the selling of the children on this continent. The family has been under attack more than anything, more than the church, more than any economic institution, more than the military, throughout our experience here. And to kind of reflect that in struggle terms and the party, more particularly, the 60s. We talk about Malcolm with his assassination, the party and us organization being sort of the culture versus the action coming to loggerheads. Both of them kind of being an ideological heir to Malcolm, but not being the total package of what Malcolm presented, because he was with both aspects of it. Party having inherited the idea, the Eurocentric ideas of the way socialism is, and the protocols and the way that it works, and even down to the verbiage, words like comrade, which for me designates a kind of points out this idea that it's a job, more or less, that it's a function that we go and we clock in and then we go home, as opposed to something that we do. Prior to the 60s, leading up to the 60s, we had the concept of family being communal. It was everybody. We still had that to whatever degree, as opposed to after that, we did not have that. Even and especially our participation within the movement began to reflect that with things like the party using certain verbiage, with folks getting involved to a degree. And one of the things that Syke and I figured out or working on when we took a vacation from the party years ago, we started building on our own and developing some things. And the emphasis for us was family. Our children would play together. We'd hang out at each other's house. We would build together. I knew his girl. If they had issues, we'd sit down as a group, like you were saying, not necessarily sing or anything, but the three of us would sit down and we'd have conversations as a group to try to resolve what was going on, that sort of thing. And so I guess what it is I'm wanting you to kind of, because you earlier when you mentioned the three aspects or the three perspectives to look at it, the first one you mentioned was family. And so that sense of family, knowing that we are, and you said African way, and I was pretty much sold on anything else you had to say when you uttered those words. For me, that's it. But the idea that we no longer have those connections and those bonds amongst one another as so-called individuals being a prime step, being a base step. One of the things that brought Syke and War and I to a point to where we're family. You know, for a long time, War wouldn't let us be family. He wouldn't even call us friends. We were acolytes or whatever it was. He refused it, you know. But over the years, we kind of worn him down, and he misses us and all of that kind of. You know, he's getting older. You know, you get.
We was assets.
Yeah, his assets. That's what it was. If he lost me, and one of his first thoughts was going to be, how do I replace Brother E? That literally, that's what it was, and that's cool. But in the back of our minds, it's always been a missing component, a primary component, a main component. One of the things that brought us together was road trips. You know, we would take road trips from Texas to DC. Very little money in our pocket. None of us was doing big money things back then. Had a vehicle at one point that made half the trip. So we got to where we were going, and we had to figure out where we were going to stay and how we're going to get back home. But that drama forced us to build one another and the bonds beyond being comrades. You know, coming to work, punching a clock, doing the work for the people, and then going back to my regular life. And so with you saying family, and understanding that the African way is that family is not your, like the circle you were talking about, is not your mama, your daddy, and the mama, the daddy, and the child. It's also grandmama, the grandchildren, aunties, uncles, cousins, John down the street, whoever. This is all family. So developing those bonds as a primary concern, not something that happened, but something that we focus on, kind of like those retreats, you know, white folks try to have with their, you know, in corporations and whatnot. They go out and do the fallback test where you fall back on somebody to see if you trust, all of that nonsense. But for us, rebuilding what has been under fire since all of this started, and starting from a very fundamental, because like you said, most of us, a lot of us, especially the cats that we've had to deal with, don't have a clue as to what a healthy family is. Well, none of us really do, but definitely don't have an understanding from an African-centered perspective of what an actual family is. And developing those bonds, as I said, is a primary goal. Like off the top, this is what we have to do. We got to get you beyond punching the clock and realize that if you get a flat at 2 o'clock in the morning, I can call Syke, yo, I need you, dude, I need you. And he's gonna come. I mean, I live in Florida, he's in Texas, so that's probably not gonna play out real well. But you get my drift, you know what I mean? So having that type of family bond as a primary, which is something that, because the party, Huey and them, were falling off of and didn't have and build on, that's part of why they fell apart and were they able to be infiltrated, was because that was not there. And I have a follow-up when you're done. So y'all, War, Syke, shh, let the man talk, and then I'm gonna ask him my follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you. You're making me remember my political history. I remember going to Black Panther. I'm 71 years old, by the way. So I graduated high school in 1970. I remember during my high school days and shortly thereafter, going to Black Panther Party community rallies down on 127th Street, I think it was, 28th Street in Madison, in the schoolyard, right, with my mother, right? Me and my mother used to go to Black Panther Party community rallies and buying the newspaper, right? Also buying Muhammad Speaks at the same time. So my generation had this plethora, all this information coming from, King, Malcolm, all this was happening. So the social environment in which we lived, there was really no place that wasn't for somebody. Everybody had a place to go based upon their orientation. So I'm remembering, and I want to give a shout out, a sense of appreciation, for the Black Panther Party in terms of how they created that But also on the other side, right, I went to Brooklyn to study industrial engineering at Pratt Institute and became a member of the East Organization, Black National Organization that was part of us, right? So I do have a long history, and I was saddened, right, when I heard about the conflicts and saw the division with these different organizations, and the question becomes, I don't think it's a question of being right or wrong. I think it's a question of how do we coalesce? How do we use what we have, our intelligence, our resources, to make it best for all of us? And that concept is called political pluralism. Concept is called political pluralism. So if whatever organizations that exist, we have to also remember those conflicts was put in place by the federal government. And this is another part of our history that most people don't know and don't appreciate it: the counterintelligence program. It wasn't just that; it was the Black Death. Every different city you go to, it was different state organized terror against our people that created the conflict, that maintained the conflict, that heightened the conflict. So it wasn't just the members themselves; it was how they were infiltrated and how they were instigated to create these kinds of things, right? We call them agent provocateurs. All our organizations are agent provocateurs. If there was somebody was sent in to say we're going to bomb this, I mentioned Brother Hakeem Anderson, and he was saying how these trumped up charges, man, that he was arrested for blowing up City Hall, which he didn't, that wasn't even something he was planning to do, right? So those charges was put on us. So we really can't talk about the conflict between our organizations without understanding that third level in terms of being a domestic colony and how the government is always attempting to neutralize us, right? And of course, we can go back to the paper when it was discovered out of Media, Pennsylvania, when they broke into selective service offices. Some white boys wanted to get their records so they wouldn't be drafted, and they found these other documents that showed that the government was conspiring to create this campaign of terror against us, right? And without anyone else knowing about it. So it was a gang. So I don't want us to look at the conflict amongst ourselves in isolation. I think we have to put it in the context for us to really appreciate it. Now, to answer your question about the family, 1865, when they told us we were free, why didn't everybody leave the South? They didn't leave the South because they were looking for their uncle, their brother, their husband, their wife, their children. We stayed there because we were looking for our people. And you know what? That's the same thing that is still happening today. We're still here connected with our people. Many people don't repatriate because not that they are so in love with America. No, that's not it. It's that we have strong love for our people, and self-included, right? How come I haven't repatriated, right? I don't want to leave my granddaughter, right? But now, things are heating up on such a level that I might have to change my mind and say, listen, I'm going to create a safe spot for you when you someplace for you to go when you think that you need to leave this place. So even though we didn't have legitimate families from the point of by law, because we couldn't marry, right? So we had to do it. We had to jump the broom. So as a people, we were denied legal standing. Those institutions of the family didn't have legal standing, but we jumped the broom and we loved each other. And this is something that we don't want to talk about as well, and that is how the trauma has turned us on each other. I'm talking about child sexual abuse. I'm talking about rape. It says that for every one white woman that reports rape, 15 black women are raped, right? We have some serious social problems. And all those problems are related to a lack of power. It's a question of power, right? Rape is not a question of sexual gratification. It's a question of
Oh.
can I exert this power over someone so they couldn't resist me? So that's what we have to get right with our relationship with power. So our families, through all these struggles, have attempting to stay together and staying together. And you mentioned in the 60s, 50s, the 60s, the 70s, most Black families were together. They were two family homes, right? But once capitalism started shipping those manufacturing jobs overseas, those same families where the men was working in factories, making really good money and taking care of their family, now they're on unemployment. So what are they going to do? You're going to participate in the local economy, whatever you have around you. If you in North Carolina, you're going to be in the lumber industry. If you in Iowa, you're going to be in the growing corn industry, right? If you live in the inner cities in these micro economies, domestic colonies, you're going to participate in the local economy. That's drugs. That's violence. So all this is impacting the family. So we're still looking to develop these families, and the litmus test is look at a family and ask the question: is the grandfather connected to his son, and is that son connected to his son on 3 generations level, right? Most Black families don't have that. Either they're not connected physically. I don't have my son in my life right now, and that's one of my biggest traumas that I'm dealing with. I don't have my son, who's 33 years old, in my life directly, and he's married. He has 3 children by 3 different women, but the one that he's with now, he did marry, but I don't have any contact with him, right? So if you go to any Black family, you don't usually see the grandfather, you don't see the son, you don't see the grandson all as one, either ideologically or spiritually or economically. So we're still fighting for the cohesion of the family. During the 60s and the 70s, we had a slogan saying it was nation time. And after studying that, I of the opinion that it could be nation time as a framework or as a goal, but it's not nation time. And the reason why I say that is because nation time implies that the communities are already stable. And I used the example of Amilcar Cabral in Guinea-Bissau. He went to Portugal, studied agriculture engineering, came back to Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde Islands, and he was going around the different communities and politically educating them and convincing them to become part of the liberation struggle. So that was a national liberation struggle because the communities were already concrete. They was consolidated. Our community is not consolidated. Our family is not consolidated. So we have to work from the bottom up. So as the brother said earlier, we have to have both sides. We have to have cultural nationalism, if you will, rebuilding our culture, and we have to have the political arm in terms of being a revolutionary as well. So we're still struggling to bring those communities in existence. I came through what is called CB, the Council of Independent Black Institutions, where we were using all these principles for develop families and develop those connections. And once we didn't find enough funding from the parents to sustain, right, the so-called private schools, which they were, then what happened is that charter schools came up as possibilities. So many of the schools that was part of CB, the Council of Independent Black Institutions, they became charter schools. And then after a while, the ideology of those schools started to get watered down. So it became no different than any other so-called, colonial school. So our people are in a state of rebuilding. But that rebuilding, beloved, I think you hit it right on the head. I think the rebuilding starts with our families. How do we join our families together? I do family counseling, and one of the models that I use is ABC, A plus B plus C equals X. A is the world that happens to you, right? Outside the world, things happen. B is the resources that are pulled upon as a result of that action. and how your family responds to it. C is what understanding do I have of what just happened, and how am I going to work with it. And then X is the result, which could be it could be a trauma, it could be a crisis, or it could be resilience, right? So now when I work with families, I'm always looking at what is their history, right? I'm working with a family now that lost their mother, lost the mother's sister, their aunt, and lost a very close friend, like an elder, right? And they're dealing with this grief, right? So what I had to do is ask them, what things, the last person who died in your family, what happened? What strengths were surfaced, and how did you start to work each other? And I had them hugging each other, so forth and so on. So our people have to be assisted in realizing the strengths that we have. I work from a strength base, right? So the family has to be given places in which they can start to realize their strengths and start to be a healing balm to one another. Hopefully I answered your question.
Absolutely, Bob. I appreciate that. And my follow-up is
one other, if I can, right? And people don't like to admit it, but Moynihan was right. For those of you who don't know, Moynihan came out with a study in about 1968, and in that study he said that white people don't want to realize the level of negative consequence that we as white people have impacted upon Black people through, he uses the word discrimination, right, of 3 centuries of discrimination. But it wasn't discrimination, it was oppression. And he goes on to say that as a result of that, the Black family was weakened as a result of that. And if we don't do things to bolster up and support the Black family, we're going to have a crisis that's going to be almost insurmountable and almost unsolvable. So now we look at it 50 years later, and everything he said in that report, the Moynihan report, is true. Why? Because the country backed off of the things that should be done. Welfare was put in where now the man had to disappear in order for the woman to get the welfare. The man had to hide under the bed or in the closet or something. And if you found it, you got kicked off the welfare. It was a whole strategy that decimated the Black family, right? And now we're still trying to rebound from that. So it's really important to read the Moynihan report and see how what he was saying is true. But more than that, the question is, how do we come together and say, okay, how can I link up with your family? How do these families become more interdependent upon one another? When we start to look at our resources and start to say, okay, we're going to plan using the principle of Ujamaa, cooperative economics. How are we going to plan and start to live ourselves to handle our resources in a more intelligent and more collective fashion?
Absolutely. And I remember that report. I used it a lot of times in some of the classes back in the day. But yeah, I always thought that report was very, very dope. And you kind of started leaning into my follow-up question, which what?
Well, you go. Just let me say this real quick. It's gonna be fast. It's the brother just said, he just touched something in my mind. I ain't gonna take too long. But I remember as a child, I can remember those men a man or something that my mother may have been dating, having to hide in the closet or hide under the bed because the welfare social worker was coming by. And as a child, I had no political education and understanding of how to interpret this. So as a child, I looked at this and I had absolutely no respect for this man. I didn't see this as somebody that I could look up to or that I could follow to learn something from, because he was hiding in a closet because some little white woman was coming by. I just couldn't see it, and that just adds to the damage that was being done. And I can't remember seeing strong male figures in my life until I stepped out into those streets and saw those gangsters who was carrying those guns and had that gangster talk and that gangster walk, and that's was my first introduction to what I thought was manhood, because those dudes hiding in those closets couldn't have been. I just wanted to say that, and he sparked that in my thinking when he mentioned that. It's something I haven't thought about in decades. But go ahead, E, my bad. Go ahead.
So my question, I guess, becomes, if I'm a chairman of a chapter or national or whatever, in terms of, and I'm being real specific, of the party, if I have membership, essentially in my head, what is a family, or purporting what should be coming from an African-centered perspective, this is a family, or aspiringly a family. How do we develop that coming back and mending those bonds? Because again, family being a communal sense, a communal thing for African people, though we weren't birthed from the same mother, we are we. And, re-injecting that into the membership of an organization, whether that organization is me and my children, my woman, and, our individual family members, or the membership of the party, getting those members to see one another as not just members of an organization, but actually establishing family and community types of ties between one another, so that the words brother and sister take on more of their African-centered meaning, a fuller meaning than what it is we've been given in this society. It's hollow, bruh, sis. These young folk, it tripped me out when first time I heard a younger brother or sister refer to another sister as bro. Like he said something like, what, you getting mad, bro? And I look over and he's talking to a female. I'm like, what I don't understand what's happened now. Now females are bros? What's happening with this? So getting back to where those words actually carry significance like they used to carry. I mean, how do we begin to mend those ties back together within the membership of whatever organization we're dealing with?
I think it really comes down to, I look at humans having four possibilities. One is consent, two is relationship, three is empowerment, and four is abundance. So I think it goes back to, what are we agreeing to? What are you agreeing to? And if you're talking about two families, even if you're talking about two families inside of an organization, what are they agreeing to? And sometimes we don't always know what we've agreed to, or what other person assumed that we've agreed to, and we haven't. So communication becomes so essential, and working through those things. So you come together with agreement. Then the relationship is how you talk to each other. What goals you set for yourself. You work through that, and only after a while, when you see that there's so much potential in the relationship, that you bypass, not that you overlook, but you just tolerate those contradictions and things that you don't like, so that you can actually build something, and then you can see the empowerment. You can begin to say that these are things that we can create together. And then you work at that long enough, then you get to a point of abundance. So the question becomes, these families that are working together, what's been that trajectory, right? What have they agreed to? How do they handle those conflicts, right? How do they stay? So when you look at organizations, right, there's been a high level of recidivism. People join an organization and leave. Why do they leave? Usually they leave because they haven't fully agreed to the principles that organization said that they are based upon. They haven't fully, in which means to some extent it's dealing with their internal contradictions. So in psychodrama, which I've been studying for the last 3 years now, I guess, it starts off with what's called prescriptive roles, right? Things that you do to strengthen yourself, right? And the analogy I'm giving you is, I like to use, is if you are going deep sea diving, well, depending upon the depth in which you're going to go, you need an iron suit on. You need something to protect you from the pressure that you're going to encounter. And the working with trauma has a similar kind of obstacle to overcome. You have to equip people with certain psychological resources so that they can actually withstand the conversation, right? So again, we've never been taught these things as a people, so we haven't had the therapy, so we don't know how to do that. Psychodrama, the second level of psychodrama, deals with what's called the trauma triangle, where you internalize the oppression. So we all have the oppressor inside of us, right? The perpetrator. All of us have been victimized, so we have a part of that in our psychology. And there's also a third thing, which they call the abandoning authority. Right? The abandoning authority consciousness is the thing that usually trips us up all the time. You talked about family, right? How many times did a daughter tell her mother that she was raped by the mother's boyfriend, and the young girl isn't believed? How many times do young children see the mother with different men, over periods of time? So what concept of family are they going to have? I mean, all these different things, right? So the abandoning authority is something that is really tearing us apart or breaking us down. But I think there's a fourth aspect, and I call that fourth aspect the passive agent provocateur, which means we have been socialized to be against ourselves. So it's not just the regular, those three things, but because we are, right, that third level, living as an oppressed national colony, that third level is that certain things have been put inside of us that gives us a knee-jerk reaction to be against each other, rather than showing compassion, rather than showing understanding, rather than working it out, right? So if we don't recognize those four things that exist inside of our psychology, we're not going to have healthy relationships. Dr. Amos Wilson said, the enemy, he says the greatest thing we have is our love for each other, but the enemy must create the circumstances in which that love is minimized, because we know that love is the strongest thing we have for each other. So by necessity, the enemy has to always minimize this great love that we have for each other. So those are my my thoughts about how can the families work together, how these different psychological states that we exist in, how we have to identify them, and certainly male chauvinism has to be front and center, because most of these conflicts come out of male chauvinism, right? Where our ego is involved, and my wife is constantly helping me to defeat it, to recognize it and defeat it. I don't think a week goes by where I'm not being educated. Like, no, that was arrogant. No, that was male chauvinism, and it needs to happen, right? So you can't live in a male chauvinist society without being chauvinist. It doesn't mean that you have to stay in that consciousness, but it's impossible for us not to have it because it's so endemic to the environment in which we live. So all of this, right, the work we do with our individual selves and our family is connected to the work that we do inside the organizations. And Brother Kenyatta hasn't said a word yet, and I'm waiting to hear his observations, because this young man has so much wisdom and so much love for his people that he's my other son.
Peace, Baba. Thank you for bringing me into the conversation, because I actually wanted to add on to ask a question. When we were talking about the abandoning authority as one of these positions within this cycle of trauma, something that's very important, and this is why I wanted us to have this conversation. If young people do not get a certain amount of functional information about their movement and their people, okay, and then an elder passes away with that information and does not pass it to them, this creates this dynamic of abandoning authority. Right? You see where I'm going with this? And this is the importance, well, because there's things that we know y'all have experienced. Some people didn't make it out, but some of y'all did, because you're still here, you see, and that's what makes you an elder, that gives you that eldership, not just an older person. you're able to make it through with some sense of yourself, physically, mentally, and emotionally. So, we want to make sure that these lines of communication stay open, just like how you told us about certain periods that happened during the 70s and the 60s that y'all came through. We're going through that now, and we need to make sure those lines of communication are not open before y'all physically leave us, because y'all always going to be with us, because y'all great generation, you know what I mean? But we need to make sure that we get all the rules, tools, and jewels from y'all, from all aspects, whether it be NAACP type elders, or whether it be an elder like yourself who's a master in psychology, or whether it be a nationalist elder, or whether it be even a religious elder. They all have things to give us. And I just wanted to add that, about making sure that we have this elder council that has a multiplicity and a plethora of people that can give us these different healing experiences, Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think that over the years, I've noticed that the most sustainable thing are rites of passage programs. Remember, we lost the military war because we got captured, right? That was a military battle. We lost the military war, and we all know that. But the thing which we don't always fully appreciate is losing the cultural war. And that means our relations. They have to decimate the so-called family and tribal relationships. They had to decimate them in order to actualize the subordination. You can't subordinate the people if they're connected, if they're struggling and see their collective survival as primary. When you take that away from them, then the idea that they are a nation, you've defeated them because they've lost all their power. So our struggle has been, how do we create national consciousness? That is seeing ourselves as a colony, seeing ourselves as a nation inside of a nation. My teachers will include Dr. Imari Obadeli, Republic of New Africa. My teachers include Dr. Yusef Clyde, in terms of, he was Malcolm X's chairperson of the OAU in Canada, and his organization, of which I'm a member, is ICFOM, International Human Rights Association for American Minorities, right? Without a nation consciousness, we'll be treated as individuals. We'll be treated as, and that's what they always want. They want us to have individual needs, individual desires, individual protocols. I suggest that we start to look at some basic definitions. What is success? We have to just decide. We have to define what success is. I do believe that a healthy definition of success is something that's good for me, something that's good for my family, and also something that's good for my community. Without our people starting to use that as the rubric and definition of success, we're going to stay in this this internal contradiction amongst ourselves. So somebody selling drugs, they're not selling drugs to hurt people. That's not really their intent. Their intent is, if you're dumb enough to buy it, I'm smart enough to sell it. And if I don't sell it, somebody else is going to sell it. So why not me? Right? But they are socially disconnected from their people. They're not looking at the harm, right? And the Panthers, used to go to drug dealers and say, yo, you won't have to get this up. And they say no, okay, then we got to rubber. And remember, that's how he got shot, right?
That's right. Yep. Yep.
So there's a rubric that I've been given to look at our people on 4 different levels. The first level is those who are conscious and is living a life wanting to bring success for themselves, for their family, for the community. And part of how they spend their time and their resources and their money reflects that. You have a level underneath that where people pretty much understand what's going on, but they don't have enough trust in us to believe that anything they do, their sacrifice is going to mean anything. So they say, listen, I can't work with people because it's not going to amount to anything. The level underneath that is people like, I know the thing is messed up, but I got to go to work every day. I got to make the best way I can. And then you have a level underneath that, the fourth level, where people will then prey on each other as their form of sustenance. That bottom level, you have to educate or you have to neutralize. The next level up, you have to educate. The next level up, you have to convince. And the next level up, you have to organize. You cannot organize people who haven't internalized a value system that is collective. You cannot organize it, because as soon as something comes up that's to their liking, they're going to take it, particularly if it comes to material gain, right? Coming here, I was driving from Manhattan to New Jersey, and I saw an advertisement for the picture of Lumumba, right? They're going to do this documentary, this film on Lumumba. And I was speaking to my son, my wife's son, about the treachery, of that traitor, that black devil, Mobutu, right? And this is what Malcolm talked about in our community, the house Negro and field Negro, right? There's always been this division, and it's not only happens here in the United States, it happens throughout the world. It happens throughout Africa. Like, what side are you on, right? And we're going to have to deal with these contradictions in terms of if we choose to be free. That is, if we choose to be free.
And I just want to add on to that real quick, y'all. That is what I meant when he talked about the interactions, the negative interactions that we have in organizations. That's what I was talking to when I said the residuals of Black organizational trauma, the things that drive us away from wanting to come together because of a past trauma that's triggered, So.
Well, look here, before we go in on any further, let me say this, Magnetic, real quick. I caught that little bit of shade you threw out there a second ago. I caught that, and you said you thank Baba for bringing you into the conversation. It's okay. I understand. We wasn't trying to ignore you, but understand, okay, like Baba here, he'll always be a special guest because he's an elder. So he'll always get that special, consideration, yield to him, da-da-da-da-da. You've been here enough times. You ain't special no more. You just a guy. So you're going to have to fight for your piece in the game, just like me, War, and Sight got a piece. So you got to put your hand up, say, hey, rah, 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 rah. So all of that special consideration, you're just a guy.
Now I know the rules. Thank you for giving me the rules, man. I appreciate that, man. The rules of engagement.
That's what the MOI is for. That's what MOI do.
I'm really, I want to let y'all know I'm really appreciative that you would, want to hear some of my, opinions, and that you would bring me into your circle, because when somebody invites you into their space, man, that's the greatest thing that you can do. Invite people into your space, into your home, into your heart, into your conversation, into your organization. I want to let you know I don't take it lightly. I take it as a serious honor. And any way that you think I could be of any assistance, bring that to my attention. Because I don't know how many days I got on the planet. I plan to be here a while, but I know that I'm closer to the ascension than I am to the birth. I'm clear.
Okay. And that's what me and War and Sight gonna talk briefly about after when we do our wrap up at the end. With just the three of us having a brief debrief. Now I got some things I need to get across to them about this conversation. So yeah, right on what you just said.
I want to go ahead and mix this in before we get too much into that, just real quick. And this is some scripture. It's Sunday, so I think it's appropriate, okay? But it said, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to the fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a great curse. So when I first read that, I said, well, wow, we definitely know that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad came and did that, right? He came and he gave us something, before the coming of the day of the, great and dreadful day. And then we also know about the Father who came and taught the 5%, who was taught by Elijah. So them two is kind of connected. But I was like, who was it that turned the hearts of the children against the Father? And who was it that turned the hearts of the fathers against the children? And then, when I kind of asked that to Baba in relationship to this question, he said, well, it makes me think of Willie Lynch. You remember when you said that, Baba, when we was on the phone? And I was like, oh, well, there it is. And I started going through the list of things that he said how he would use to divide us, and one of them was age. And this is kind of, what I see as one of the foundational ideas that created what we call intergenerational conflict. Someone actually made money and built his empire on a crack that he put within our foundation. And this is, once again, when I talk about the cracks of the cracker, we call him the cracker, not as a derogatory term, because he puts cracks in our unity, in our culture, in our spiritual systems, in our relationships to each other. And to be able to heal, we have to seal these cracks, and that's why I wanted us to have this conversation. You know what I mean? So that we can connect the older generation of Panthers and all their wisdom and knowledge and their understanding back to us, and we can, like the brother always say, Sankofa, look back in order to move forward.
In the nationalist community, when we used to have conflicts, we had something called U, letter U, the letter C, and a letter U. And the process was called unity, criticism, unity. And the way we used it was to say when there was a contradiction, when someone professes a principle, but their action is in contradiction, in opposition to that principle, we want to bring it to the table to look at it, right? So we had the process of unity. What principle are we citing as that is relevant here? Criticism in terms of how it wasn't understood, how it was misunderstood, and then how do we leave that space with a greater unity amongst us, right? So the criticism wasn't for division; it was really for correction. Now, over the years, I've felt that we still can use UCU, but I think we have to, in tandem, we have to use UHU, unity, healing.
Like that.
So now we have to come up with a different methodology where so it's UHC, right? Unity, healing, criticism, unity. So in criticism, there must be a healing aspect such that people feel heard, they feel that they belong, they feel that they can have a voice, and they come out of it feeling good. I'll give you an example. I work with a group called Promise Neighborhood of Lehigh Valley, small town called Allentown in Pennsylvania. And this young woman felt that she was talked harshly against, some kind of conflict with a supervisor who had wanted her to go and do outreach, which everybody in the organization does. And in the middle of the conversation or near the end, she said that I came in expecting that I was going to be told that I'm not welcome here anymore. And then she used the example that in other organizations, when things like this happen, that was the result. And I let her know, I said, well, you've never been in this situation before, because you've never been in an organization that defines itself as being Black-led, anti-racist, revolutionary or liberation-based, and community-based. You've never been in an organization that has those 5 things as their pillars of the organization. And even when I questioned her, I said, well, do you have an appreciation, since this thing has come to your knowledge, come to your awareness, you have appreciation of just seeing that you came into the conversation already prejudiced. You already had already listening. And she couldn't answer it. She in her own mind, I don't think she was really cognizant of the fact that she didn't answer the question. So we have these blocks in our thinking, but she left the conversation feeling heard, feeling valued, and feeling that whatever needs to get worked out could be worked out. So we've been taught how to punish people, right? Because that's what a person does. Elijah Muhammad said, the only thing that white man's education can teach you is to teach you to be a better slave. You know, the only thing the white man education can teach is to be in more conflict with each other, because that's how he's gotten what he's gotten is for us to maximize the conflict. So yes, there's been a challenge to the authenticity of Williams' speech, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Williams' speech is authenticated or not. Those things have happened, and those things are
continue
the
to happen.
family. Those things are the family tradition that we're passing down from one generation to the next. And now we have to be the generation that says we're going to cut that off. This is a generation where that stops. I don't like people using the word generational. Some people talk about historical trauma out here often again. The generational curse. So when you say generational curse, that's saying that you've been cursed by the Creator. I ain't buying that. I'm not going along with that. So I tell people, I would ask you to revisit that and speak about historical trauma, not historical curse, because then you kind of playing into the white man's opinion of us that what Ham was the son of Ham was cursed because he saw his father. You know what I mean? So we wound up buying into that and wound up continuing that kind of thinking, which is I don't think that's the way that I'm going to be liberated. Taking someone else's opinion of a situation and then putting me in a negative light. I'm not going to accept that as being my path to liberation. So we have to be. How do we correct the language, correct the concepts in such a way that again, we want to have unity? I mentioned Promised Neighborhood. We've come up with something called soul. And the reason why we say soul is because, one, that was the Europeans' rationale, that we didn't have a soul. So since we didn't have a soul, that means by default we were animals. So therefore we was like an animal, like a cow, like a chicken, like a dog, like anything else, and we needed to be treated that way. That gave them permission to treat us that way because they took us out of the human family, right? So the first thing we have to do for our liberation is to define the fact we do have a soul. So that's why soul is used. But we use it as a philosophy and a methodology. The methodology says, as any meeting we come to, we're going to bring our strength. You let people say, what strength are you bringing to this meeting? O is opportunity. What opportunities do I see in front of me, right? Maybe I don't know this person. I don't know enough about this person, or I don't know much about this project, or whatever conversation we're talking about. What opportunity do you see that you can get out of this engagement that you're about to participate in? After you participated in that process, we say you meaning unity. Did it strengthen our unity amongst each other? Is the bonds between us greater now than or is it lesser? If the bonds is lesser, we did something wrong. We did something. Whatever happened just a moment ago, and we're not feeling a stronger level of unity, we did something wrong. That means some kind of way the European concepts dominated that space in such a way that we wasn't able to use our African concepts to overturn it, right? And then L is liberation. This experience, did it give us an understanding? How was liberation part of what just happened to us? And then how, that's the little L, and the big L, how did this advance our liberation struggle? Because if we're not thinking and moving and making revolution and making liberation by default, we're staying in the same state that we're in. That's oppression. So that's called soul, S-O-U-L. So, over the years, I'm looking at the different ways in which we can process, right, our conflicts, the different ways that we can augment and strengthen our bonds, and be able to create, which I'm calling social health, right? It's not and some of the criticisms of the Panthers and the organizations in the 60s then was that they didn't have, a strong, they had the love for their people, but they didn't have the level of compassion that allowed people to kind of get folded back into the process, right? A lot of excommunication took place. And I think part of it is just being more tolerant of each other. That's not, I'm not allowing contradictions to exist that would stymie the organization in our movement, but it has to be a level of humanity inside of our organizations much greater than what the European gives us, right?
Mm,
We can't say we're going to use punishment all the time and think we're going to get anything other than the same results that we get from the punishment
right.
system in which we live in. So
Mm,
these are some of the things that I've experienced. UCU, adapting it, making it U, HU, looking at looking at the ways in which we can communicate with each other so people feel whole, right? So our liberation struggle is making the people whole, mentally, physically, and spiritually. So the work that I do, I'm always looking at different ways and processes and techniques to be used to engender a feeling of health and a feeling of love and respect for one another.
mm,
All right, I want to jump in real quick because engaging what you're talking about in terms of us being able to reach the people within the Black Panther Party, we have what we refer to as our survival core, which is the tripolar injunctions of a victim. 3 elements make up that. One being the coping mechanism, the second being the displacement mechanism, and the third being the denial mechanism. Within the coping mechanism, it goes into our recognition that our people are stuck in survival mode. They're stuck in a mode to where they basically have learned to adapt to their oppression. Self-displacement goes into the fact that we don't know who we are, and basically kind of getting into what you focus on, the trauma that has caused us to not know self. So that's our self-displacement. The third one being the denial, and that's when we dealing with, like what we said earlier in regards to Malcolm talking about the house Negroes, or just Black folks who feel like there ain't a real problem. The problem ain't a Black community. The problem ain't what y'all say it is. The problem is we can reform this system. And so speak on the element of denial, because you hit on something when you talked about recognizing that we are at war. And that's one of my pet peeves. Being that the people, if we're dealing with the people that don't know we're at war, they're going to be stuck in the stage of denial, which means you can't even address coping or self-displacement. So when we're talking about the condition of people being in denial, and also you reference that as it applies to COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, how do we help to resonate and awaken a unconscious people that are stuck in denial? Or do we?
Good, excellent question. Well, ancestor Chokwe Lumumba. Let me go back. Dr. Immanuel Bardeli asked the question, when did we consent? When did we consent to these conditions of oppression? We never did. Now we submitted so that we could survive, and that's why we're living today, right? Our ancestors said that they're going to do whatever was told of them, and they tried to use guerrilla warfare as best they could, which guerrilla warfare was putting poison into the meals. Guerrilla warfare was unscrewing screws. Guerrilla warfare was acting stupid and they didn't understand, right? Any way that would stop the means of production of being exploited, our people did that. It's important, I think, for us to see how our people have been fighting against the enemy in all these different ways. So Chokwe Lumumba said that our people basically have 4 choices. One is to believe in the American nation state, and want to be and try to become a citizen. 2 is to claim the right of self-determination and establish a nation state here on the land, and I'm using the Republic of New Africa. 3 is to repatriate to Africa And Malcolm said, at first he was saying repatriate to Africa, then he said, well, just repatriate culturally and politically, right? And 4, repatriate to any other, nation state where you have majority of African people. Those are the 4 choices that we have in front of us. One of the most important things that we have to do as a people is to give each other that choice. And that isn't to say someone is wrong for that choice, just saying that's the choice that they make. Because until we figure out a way, and I used this term earlier, political pluralism, until we figure out a way of religious and political pluralism, until we figure that out so that we can give each other the right to say of what these 4 choices are, until we figure that out and make a place that the goal is having everyone giving each other the right to have those choices. That's our critical problem. Just recently, it's been a movement has been underfoot to look at us as prisoners of war, and it goes back to the Papal Bull of 1542, when the Pope declared that Portugal had the right to capture land, subdue us, take all our goods for their benefits, right? That was an act of war. It's now some popes said that, they discounted it, but we're still under that. So right now there is a movement to take this to the International Criminal Court, not to the Human Rights Council, but to the Criminal Court. Brother named Senwepe, who's Belanca, he's repatriated to Guinea-Bissau, and I'll be sending you this information. And for a plebiscite to take place, like go back to Mario Badella, he says that our people have to have a plebiscite. A plebiscite is where the people vote for their relationship to the nation state in which they belong. And it doesn't have to be unilateral. It doesn't have to be just one question. I don't know if there's been a plebiscite where you had those 4 choices, but what he is, and he's been studying this for the last 20 years or so, and he's gone back and he's looked at all the times in which a plebiscite vote was taken. There's only been something like 19 in the last 50 years or so. And the reason he says that's so, because it's such a stringent criteria that has to be met in order for it to be considered an official international plebiscite, and not many people have been able to accomplish it. So it brings into consideration, and what he wants to do in this plebiscite is to have these 4 choices. So, the question of denial, well, maybe it's not a question of denial. Maybe it's a question of political preference. And to whatever degree that they have drunk the Kool-Aid and they think that they can become a citizen, well, you can't convince people of that otherwise. Now, of course, Garvey said, as N.B.P.P told me, when everything fails to organize the people, conditions will. And there are some people, particularly from the Marx and Lenin school of thought, that they want to create a lot of confusion and turmoil and strife, because at that point people will say, well, damn, I don't have no other choice, right? I don't agree with that scenario. But the thing is, no matter what I believe, or no matter what anybody else believes, what are the objective and subjective conditions that's going to move us? We can look back at George Floyd. When George Floyd happened, man, the whole, our people and the whole world just rose up and fell down, right? Kwame Ture teaches us that our people are very spontaneous. We can explode, but we don't have sustainability as far as protracted struggle. And as a result of that, we fall right back into the same situation prior to us showing our resistance. How do we move from instantaneous to sustained and scientific way of looking at our problems? So I don't know if it's denial, because we can't move without them, and they can't move without us. And the Europeans know that as long as they keep these 4 factions divided in terms of our political ideologies, and our political goals and aims and missions, as long as they can keep us divided and not coming together under a national front for the right of choice, right? As long as they can keep us divided, they know that they'll be able to continue their subjugation of us and disallow us to have voice in the international arena. right? But once we organize ourselves to have this plebiscite, the world can look at us differently, and they can say they are politically mature and they have organized themselves as any other national liberation struggle has done to say that we have to recognize them. That's how we're going to get our help. So the Panthers made international connection. SNCC even made international connection. My teacher, Irvin Davis, was probably the first NGO representative representing our people through the United Nations, right? So we've attempted to create these international bonds, but without a real consolidated front, collective front, we haven't been able to really show what is called a critical mass in terms of that. So I don't know if it's really denial. I think we have to look at it from a broader lens, and that lens is political pluralism. That we say you have that choice to do that, because until we get them to say that let them know we really that's your choice to do that, but please also respect my choice. And how can we help each other that whatever choice we choose to make, that there's a certain groundswell that's going to give us the political, and I'm not talking about political in terms of Democrat, Republican, I'm talking about political in terms of the right of self-determination. When I say political, that's what I'm talking about. How do we get a groundswell where political self-determination is being exercised so they can represent these four different camps and we can work together.
So, muted. You got something? You muted, Syke. There you go.
Go ahead. I was just going to let y'all know that we're getting close to getting ready to close out. And I did have one question, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, how can we direct trauma triggers and produce a different result that pulls us out of a perpetual cycle of generational dysfunction?
Yeah, I think the work that I had referenced earlier, the Community Healing Network and their association with the National Association of Black Psychologists and how they've created the emotional emancipation circles, I think that's the first step. It's like first aid, emotional first aid. You have to give people something to help them with that toothache. Help them. Maybe we can't do major surgery, right? But sometimes to get the process started, you start with first aid, right? When an ambulance comes to your house, they stabilize you, they put you in a stretcher, they strap you down, they might give you some antibiotics, stabilize you, take you to hospital where another level of care can be executed, right? So right now, I do believe no matter what organization you are part of, no matter what ideology that you have, without this first dose of this emotional emancipation medicine, we're going to keep spinning those cycles. Actually, that has been the first step. So I say that that's the first step. Then after that, then we, not even after that, but being simultaneous to that, starting to look at different rites of passage programs in all of our different places where we have. And that when I say rites of passage, I'm not just saying for the young people. Their elders will come together. The sister out of where she's from, Kansas, who's created this movement to create council of elders, right? So, and somebody said earlier, it's not just a question of just being old or being a senior. What wisdom do you have? What discipline do you have? What things can you say that you have deserved? You've earned the rank of elder, right? So she has a whole different thing. So now we're starting to I think, build the organizations we have, and also build the community in general. If you understand what I'm trying to say, it's not just focus on one particular organization, but I think it has to be in conjunction with the general work that we're doing in the community. So this Council of Elders shouldn't only be just one organization, right? It should be people from the community, different people from the community, because we all live in these micro domestic colonies, and we all experiencing gun violence. What is gun violence? Gun violence is a powerless people who inside themselves feel powerless, but feel the need to exert some level of power, and it comes out as it does in terms of of these shooters. So when we think of bulimia, right, eating disorders have been understood not to be a question of diet or food intake. It's connected to power, where people feel so powerless in their life. They feel the only power they have is to use the power over their own body. So the body suffers, but this thing about power gets exercised at the expense of the body. Well, look at gun violence. It's the same thing. If you look at our people as a whole, as an organic whole, you could see how that analogy is true as well. So our solution is with the people. Our solution is with the village. Our solution is with us gaining power.
Thank you for that. That was actually, you started into my last question, because when I was in Atlanta, I was lucky enough to deal with some of the residue, because he was already incarcerated at the time, Emil Al-Jamin, in regards to what was going on in the West End, and also an organization called the Organization of Functional Unity, which was basically an elder council. And so from that standpoint, I attempted to introduce that into the Black Panther structure base. And so from that standpoint, and this goes into something I even talked with Magnetic about, is that I believe that when we talk the new generation of the Panthers, we must have an elder council that oversees and helps to guide that new generation of the Black Panthers. So I kind of just wanted your thoughts on that.
I think that's excellent, because what you're doing is you're building social organization, right? Not just political education, which is important, but you're building social organization that's complementary to the political organization. I think that's a very wise thing, because remember, I had said we lost the military war, but we also lost the cultural social war. And I did a paper on this when I went through the African-centered Social Work Academy with the National Association of Black Social Workers, and that's when I really began to understand the significance of the second war that we lost, and how only by rebuilding our social institutions will begin to build that social cohesion again. Let me say this. There's a few things which I feel are primary in my life right now. In social construction for me, I work in the field of birth equity. That means, what does that mean? That means that Black women are dying disproportionately in every place that they live in the United States. There's so-called third world countries that have higher rates of good birth outcomes than African women here in the United States. So as the father coordinator, the work that I do is to help brothers assume their role in not just the pregnancy, that's a given, but also in the pregnancy as the baby is growing, the gestation period, right, the birthing process, and postpartum. And the thing which I've only been in this field for about 3 years, and the thing which was so amazing to me is that how come we don't have an organized care team? Well, what do I mean by that? So every Black woman, when she gives a birth, should have a midwife, should have a doula for her, should have a doulo for him. And these terms are just helpers, right? Support people. Should have lactation consultant, and should have a health coach. At least 5, but there's up until this point, there's no organizations that have been created to bring those 5 functions together as one unit, as a care unit. And it blows my mind. In fact, Magnetic, his wife, my adopted daughter, her mother is a midwife in not practicing now, but in Eritrea. She told me how when her mother used to go out, she'd go with her mother and go to the place in which the women were having birth. The whole village would come. The men would bring the wood, or they'll bring the food, they'll bring different things. So the concept is what village midwifery. And I'm on a campaign that says anytime a Black woman has a baby, she should not do anything for at least 9 days. Nothing. But no, the only way that can happen is that we have to reconstitute the village and say, well, if she's not going to do nothing, who's going to cook her food? Who's going to go shopping? Who's going to wash her clothes? Who's going to pay whatever bills? Anytime a Black woman has a baby, she shouldn't have to do anything for 9 days minimum. I like to say 18. I like to say 36, but hey, I got to start somewhere, right? 9 days, right? Number of completion. So how is it that we have not created an association of bringing all those 5 elements together? It blows my mind. But then again, maybe not. Maybe we're still beginning to appreciate the devastation of our social networks and our social systems. And that's one thing that's been pushed out, but that's the thing that has to be replaced. So our liberation process, our nation building process, is starting to see the needs and seeing the resources that would complement those needs, and then the social organization that would be the vehicles that will be able to, bring those things into existence. So that's my campaign. I call it the 9-day campaign, right? Because Black women are dying disproportionately in every place that we live in the United States. And sometimes those rates is as high as 16 times greater death rates than the white counterpart, like in Brooklyn, for example. 16 times the rate that Black women are dying having babies in Brooklyn compared to their white counterpart. I don't even know if that's the highest, right? The Black Wall Street, what's that?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. Women are dying like you're shooting them off the shelf, right? So that's the crisis that we have to deal with now. Because without Black women living and without Black babies living, we don't have Black life. Black life can only come through that Black body.
That's right.
So our people are uneducated, and we're not focused, and we're not doing much about it. But that's like our really number one issue, because once we start to function, set our sights and focus on our women, that is going to change the way in which we live our lives.
Man, if y'all don't mind me jumping in here quick, Baba, we have a very special request. We have really enjoyed this very, very much, and we want this to be a continuing, ongoing conversation. We would like to ask you to be one of our elders for the Elder Council, specifically to counsel us in the way in which you're counseling us in the field of psychology, and with all of this good wisdom that you have in that area.
I'm honored to be considered, and any way that I can be of assistance, just let me know. I put it like this: I didn't when I went back to school to get my doctorate at the age of 68. I did it so that I could have my tool, that I would have a stronger weapon, and I would have a stronger tool. Anything can be a weapon or a tool, right? I did it so that I would have greater weapons, and I would have greater tools to build my people and to fight against the enemy. So the only way that my doctorate can be functional is that somebody invites me in to do the work that I can do. And of course, you have invited me to this conversation, because you've invited me to this relationship. I am honored and feel obligated, not yeah, I gotta do this. I feel divinely obligated, if you can understand what I'm trying to say.
Indeed.
Doc, I'm gonna be in touch with you on that note. All right, and we gonna talk further, and we gonna see if we can get this ball rolling. I definitely appreciate that.
I appreciate all of you. And I was impressed with the analysis that you've been able to share with me about the respect and the rebuilding. There was some stuff that you was saying along the lines of, whoa, wait a minute now, these brothers, they ain't playing, boy, they throwing it down.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you for coming on, brother. We appreciate Brother Magnetic for coming on again and bringing you with him. We appreciate you, brothers. We feel to get ready to bring it to a close. I wanted to say this. And I'm not going.
Conversations.
Oh yeah, true indeed. And I'm not going to go into the deeper question I want to ask. War took it. War took the whole last 10 minutes. Didn't allow me to ask my last question. However, I want to say this: that as y'all was saying, when we recognize an elder, we recognize it doesn't mean somebody just got old. It means that somebody got older, wiser in the process of going through this hell that we've been dealing with, and gain lessons that they can give back to us. Is going through
You know
this.
what? When people say that, I say, listen, the elder just means that we just made more mistakes than you made. That's all.
True indeed. And that's why you're able to give us that wisdom back to show us how not to make those mistakes. You learned the knowledge, turned it into wisdom, made it them both, and brought about understanding, and then you're able to teach us that younger generation that's coming up after you, at least those who are willing to listen, those who are willing and humble enough to understand that a well of knowledge is there. And so we greatly appreciate you, brothers. We're gonna close out. Magnetic, I'm gonna let you say something. Come up with something. Look over at a piece of paper you got on the side of you and give us something powerful before we close out.
No, I mean, I would just like to say, we talked about this before. We talked about the Panther cake, and this is definitely one of the ingredients of the Panther cake. If we look back at how the way Dr. Bobby Wright, taught a lot of the early Panthers, and how a lot of the other early Panthers drew from France Fanon, that's part of the ingredient. So I just said, hey man, let me bring some more ingredients to this Panther cake so we can eat good.
True indeed.
So I have a question. Have the new Black Panther Party adopted the code that Tupac put out in conjunction with Matulu's work? The code.
The Thug. Wasn't it Thug?
You mean Thug Life?
Yeah, the Thug Life code.
I would say no.
I don't believe so.
Some of us knew about it. In fact, I got a chance to meet. This was after Tupac passed, but I did get a chance to meet. And he was a part of the new African Panther Party, and they were attempting at that point in time in Atlanta to implement that, but it did not stick, and was not able to get implemented across the nation.
I had actually read up on it. Matulu actually sent it to us, and we read it, and I thought it was something good, for people that's kind of maybe in the movement aspect, but as far as a party, that's not something that we could really use and whatnot. But I can understand, because see, they tried to make it thug, like a thug criminal, but thug was really the hip hop underground. It's an acronym. So he was trying to give that to the hip hop people to have a better way of getting down. Yeah.
Correct.
And that's the other problem, which I think is critical, and that is, see, we don't have community now. You can't have a community if people are afraid to go outside. That's not a community. That's a war zone.
Right.
And if there's people in the own community that's creating a war, I see. That's why I do work with former gang members to help them to deter other young people from taking those steps they took. And I'm grateful to be in their presence, and they allowed me to deal with that trauma that they're dealing with. Most of my work is on the East Coast, working with True to Life out of Staten Island, and working with Promise Neighborhood also in the East Coast and in Allentown. Those are two major organizations I work with in terms of doing gun prevention work. But we have to reassess our relationship, certainly with each other, and to, as Fanon said, each generation out of its own relative obscurity must discover its own mission, either to fulfill or to betray. I don't say relative obscurity, but maybe it is, because there's been so much disruption in one generation to the next in terms of knowledge, because the mass media has infiltrated young people's minds so pervasively that it's like they're drowning in the sea of ignorance, and the ignorance that gets rewarded because of the lyrics they create are the ones that's permissible to these white giants that run these media concerns. So if you want to get paid, well, you got to run these kind of lyrics, right? So this is the first time in my life that I've seen such a disconnect between intergenerations, different generations. The disconnect is, I don't even understand what young people are saying. I'm not even saying I agree or disagree. I don't even know what they are saying. And now you can see that's a serious problem with someone who loves his people, has lived most of his life as an organizer for his people, and I can't even talk to the young people. That's a problem.
Let me just say this. I didn't talk to a lot of them too, and I don't think they know what they saying. That mumble rap crew, I don't know, because I asked them, well, what are you trying to say? It don't matter what I'm saying, man. I'm just saying it. Oh, okay, okay. So there's a lot of drugs that are involved with the creative process of that age group. As far as the trap music, it's a lot of drugs involved in that. So that equals a lot of scattered thoughts, scattered emotions, and that's part of their formula for making the music. So,
y'all jump a whole nother show. We're gonna have to bring back. We're trying to close out.
Okay. All right, brother. We should have closed. Now we're gonna close out. Well, we actually closed out already. I'm about to cut this last part and maybe turn this to a short. But we appreciate you, brothers, for coming on. We're gonna bring y'all back if y'all will bless us with y'all presence. And with that, we give y'all the peace and the power.
Peace. Black Power refinement.
Black Power.
Black Power. Free the land.
By any means.
By any means.